We do have a well-known businessman and, as of recently, a big-time Liberal supporter, Dean MacDonald, on the line. Good evening, sir.
Hey, how are you, Pete?
Great to hear from you. Really appreciate you taking the time to call the program. So, apparently now, you were listening last night. I had Minister Tom Marshall on, and we were talking about the deficit. Because, of course, Dr. Locke had said that it's probably going to be likely around double or even a bit more than was projected because of the overestimation on the cost of a barrel of oil. Did you hear his answer?
I've heard it as it was reported through the news through you guys, which I didn't think was very strong, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. I guess Tom and I have been jarring a little bit back and forth on this. Is if you look at any of the analyst reports and PIRA, the industry expert on predicting the price of a barrel of oil, of Brent crude oil, and as well as you recognize that the province has Nalcor, who has experts in this area, and as well the province is an owner in the offshore with Hebron, with Exxon, Statoil, and Husky. Nobody's predicted as high as our province did. And, as budgets go, that's a pretty tough game to play, to be picking the top number and hope you hit it, because really all you set yourself up is for failure. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing that now.
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, almost invariably before this budget, the estimation was low, and they may have taken some heat for, aiming low and then having the surplus afterwards. But certainly that's a better position to be in, and nobody minds as much when you come up with more money than you thought you were going to have. So what would be the impulse to aim higher?
Well, I think, unfortunately, just given the timing of all this, is that, there was an election last fall, mm-hmm. and probably a whole bunch of promises made in terms of spending, and then, if you have any gumption at all, you try to meet those commitments, and they're meeting them, but they're meeting them by probably overspending. And, look, we in the worst economic circumstances in 100 years which exist in this world right now, I think Labrador people would accept an answer that, look, we can't spend beyond our means, and yet we are. And the answer is, hey, look, we've got some cash and we can use it, and it's okay. Well, it's actually not okay. It's really a bad way to govern the province.
I was going to ask you about that comment. He did say that at least we don't have to borrow it. We have that money because we've had the surpluses in the past. It's still an extra $250 million less than you thought you had.
Well, it's kind of a silly comment, because all it says is we've got some money in the bank that we probably under normal circumstances would have applied against our debt. We didn't, so we're going to use it. So at the end of the day, the debt still ends up higher. So, look, that's a nice fancy way of maybe getting people to be calm about it, but the reality is it's not really being straight up with the public.
Okay. Well, listen, I'd like to, if it's okay with you, to move on to a little bit closer to Muskrat Falls and the recent comments by the Premier, talking about largely about Quebec and how that's a bigger factor than we've heard to date in terms of the need for us to proceed with Muskrat Falls. What do you make of it coming out, now and being such a strong point she's making?
Well, look, I always thought it was a big point. I don't think it was ever really made very well. I think, when people look at the debate that's happening right now, there's probably been more time spent on how ineffectual the messaging and the sales job, for want of a better term, mm-hmm. has been on Muskrat Falls by the government to the people. And, look, I was chair of Hydro under 4 different premiers, actually, if you count Beat and Talk as well. And I know, having negotiated with Hydro-Quebec, that they're a very tough negotiating group, obviously. They're after their own self-interest, and I don't think it's unfair of the Premier to say that Quebec is an issue, because the reality is, and it's not, unfortunately we personalize it in terms of Quebec. They happen to be the neighbor next door, but the reality is, look, in 2041, we don't have alternatives, we'll still be dealing with them. And look, everyone knows from a negotiating position, if there's only one game in town, your leverage to negotiate is weakened. So I don't think the point on Quebec is wrong. It's unfortunate it's just come out late, and it's probably once again sullied the view of this as whether it's a good or bad project.
Well, why do you think it's coming out late? Do you think that they're just sort of recognizing that what they've tried to date is not necessarily working as well as they hoped, or is it? Is it a reflection on the DG3 numbers that?
I'd be really surprised if the DG3 numbers aren't pretty close to where they are, given the rigor that they've taken, that Nalcor has taken in the assessment of the project, probably more so than any other project that's ever been undertaken in Newfoundland. So I think there's been a degree of due diligence on cost that is probably much stricter than anything else we've seen before. So I'm probably in the camp that I think the numbers are going to be pretty close and not something that's going to be explosive to people. I think the problem, once again, is at the end of the day is we just haven't put our best foot forward in terms of the merits of the project, and people rightly so, want to be informed. I mean, David Ogilvy, the famous advertising guy, used to say, never assume the consumer is a moron, because it's probably your spouse. And he didn't mean it as a slight. He meant it that don't take people for granted. And I think they thought it was a great project, and they may indeed be right, but they didn't really put the effort into it. Kind of like Obama last night, not thinking you need to make much of an effort to win that debate, and look what happened.
Yeah, possibly. One thing I haven't been able to get from anybody is their opinion on what number would be too high. At what point does the project stop making sense on paper? Well,
the Board of Trade has one of the best documents I've read on whether Muskrat Falls is a go or no-go is the paper that's you can go online to the Board of Trade and read their document. I only read it a couple of weeks ago before I spoke to the board myself, because I didn't even know where they stood on it. Mm-hmm. But once I read it, I went, wow, this is very thoughtful, really easy to understand, and they seem to be in the range of, look, if it's between $6 and $7 billion, it's a good project, and they lay it out. So I encourage your listeners that if they want to read something, it's 6 or 7 pages, but very concise, very well researched, and.
But isn't it already more than that? Isn't it already above that? If you look at the 6.2 that they had before, and really that's 7.3 with the financing, and then all the money that's been spent to date, I don't think is factored into that number, as far as I'm aware.
Well, the government said they are factoring it in, but my guess is there's some offsets, whether it's the value of loan guarantees, what can be possibly sold, as well as carbon credits. So my guess is, when we all see the final numbers, there's a whole bunch of factors that all weigh into that final number, and my guess is it's going to be in that range, because I'd be amazed if they were trying to barrel on down the road with this if they weren't confident that those Decision Gate 3 numbers weren't pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing we know for sure now is that when they've been saying all the way along that all we're doing is looking for the lowest cost option to provide the province with the power it's going to need well into the future, what they should have been saying is that we're looking for the lowest cost option as long as it doesn't include in the list of options purchasing it from Quebec.
Well, I'm not sure, Peter. I'm not sure I would agree exactly with that, and because the issue is, having dealt with Quebec before, is they can make life awful miserable for us, which they have in the past, because when you apply to them to wield your power through there, they're going to come back and say, we have to do studies, and they delay and delay.
Oh yeah, I'm just talking about the power we need in this province. I mean, the option is there. We could build the transmission lines, and instead of building Muskrat Falls, buy the power from them, much as Vermont has. A 25-year deal, 5.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Certainly that has to be seen as a lower option.
Well, my bet is that is being factored into it. I'd be really surprised if it's not, and I'm not sure that they have the power to give us based on their own needs. And
they had 5,000 megawatts that they couldn't sell last year. Apparently, the same amount that they get from the Upper Churchill. And they're building more capacity all the time. So apparently someone said last night, and I have no verification that it's accurate, that, it's going to be, 6 terawatts or something. And so at some point in the future, they're building so much extra capacity now that presumably they have way more than they can sell, and that'll be the case for some time to come.
Well, and once again, it's a complicated topic, and it's about, availability of that power, when it's available, if it's spot market, not spot market, is it residual power that they have to sell at certain points in time?
Yeah, I'm only talking as though, if there was an option much like Vermont availed of not too long ago and signed a 25-year deal, which is approximately what we'd be looking for to get us to 2041, right?
Yeah, my experience having dealt with Hydro-Quebec has been how they've dealt with us is that they have a attitude of entitlement. They think it's their power. Here it is, take it or leave it. They haven't really been partners in any dealings we've ever had with them. Very difficult to deal with, and I wish that wasn't the case. I wish they worked with us in the Confederation as partners, but in my experience when I was chair, that just wasn't the case. When I was chair and Roger Grimes tried to do a deal, when we started the negotiating process, there was a basic tenet on the table, which was we were going to share the benefits of the Lower Churchill 50-50 and contribute 50-50. And by the time we got to the final deal, well, it was basically so one-sided it was ridiculous. We were probably out-negotiated, quite frankly, which is why I voted against it. But it was very clear to me that they're very smart and dedicated to, pursuing their own means, as they should be. And so, as I said to you, this isn't, to me, it's not a Quebec thing. It just happens to be the neighbor next door that we have to deal with to, borrow a cup of sugar, so to speak. And today we've done a really poor job of doing that, and I think they haven't displayed a lot of what I would consider good sportsmanship in dealing with us.
Like Canada's Middle East. All right, listen.
Yeah, it is. It's really unfortunate because better heads would prevail at this because there's nothing to be gained by the nonsense and the tomfoolery.
Yeah, Mr. MacDonald, really appreciate your time. We have to run, but I got to ask you before we go. Are you getting any closer to making a decision?
Well, look, I'm absolutely consistent here with this is that I've explained to everybody, A, the nominations haven't been called. B, I'm very active in the renewal tour, and that is starting to wind down. And 3, and most importantly, obviously, I have a whole bunch of business interests across Canada which require time and would require a whole bunch of cooperation from partners and co-workers and that to see me leave. So there's lots of people to talk to, and I am. And as I've always said, look, I love this place, and I'd love to be able to contribute in some form or fashion.
Oh, you're going to be good. That was expertly put together. All right. Listen, thanks very much.
From the heart.
I really appreciate it. I look forward to it next time.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.